Welcome to my first attempt at doing my Devar Torah by way of video. I'd certainly be interested in any feedback you might have on this format. Hardening of the arteries is a serious and potentially deadly medical condition. Hardening of the heart is a serious and potentially deadly spiritual condition. This week's Torah reading, Vaera, from the book of Exodus, God strikes Egypt with 7 of the 10 plagues. The last 3 are found in the part of the Torah we read next week. Before hitting the Egyptians with the plagues, God tells Moses, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt." The idea that God would harden Pharaoh's heart and then punish him for being stubborn is theologically troubling. But setting aside the theological quandary for the moment, if we read the plague narrative carefully, look at the wording closely, we see that for the first 5 plagues, God doesn't actually harden Pharaoh's heart. It says Pharaoh's heart was hardened, not by an act of God. His heart was hardened just in response to the plagues. Every time something bad happened, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he became even more obstinate in his refusal to let God's people go. Water got turned to blood, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Frogs overrunning the land, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Lice spread throughout the land, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Swarms of flies everywhere, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Livestock dropping dead, once again, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. I've lived in Israel for the past 5 years, and I also lived here at the start of the Second Intifada from 2000 to 2001, which was an incredibly difficult time to be living here. It seemed like every week people were dying in suicide bombing attacks. Many nights I sat in my apartment in Katamon trying to study. I was a second career rabbinical student and unable to concentrate because of the sounds of gunfire coming from Gilo and Beit Jala. Pop, 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 boom, boom, boom. It's really hard to concentrate when you've got that going on. And I could feel my heart harden. I could feel my politics move to the right every time an Israeli or a tourist was killed. Good news is my politics have since recovered, but at the time, that was my reaction. And I've seen this happen to several rabbis I know. Rabbis who were somewhat left solidly in the peace camp, who've moved steadily to the right as they sent their kids off to serve in the IDF, as they've experienced the anxiety of not being able to get through to their loved ones on a cell phone immediately when there's been some kind of an attack. Good people with good hearts, who nonetheless had their hearts hardened by the plague of Palestinian violence. Many of them have become more concerned with security than with peace. Some have become inured to the hardships that Palestinians have to face on a daily basis. The hardening of the heart that many Israelis have experienced leads them to think that Israel has a PR problem, or what they call it here, hasbara. They feel the rest of the world just doesn't understand us. They don't understand what great people we are, beleaguered by those violent Palestinians who aren't serious about peace. As a result, too many Israelis turn a blind eye to the wickedness of the occupation. For over 40 years, Israel has ruled over the lives of millions of people who are not Israeli citizens, people who daily have to put up with the indignity and inconvenience of checkpoints manned by foreign soldiers, people whose freedom of movement is highly restricted, people confronted by an arbitrary system of justice. For those Palestinians who are unfortunate enough to live in Area C, the areas which are under complete Israeli civil and security control, things are even worse. The Israeli government continues to pursue policies aimed at increasing the number of Jews in Area C and driving out as many Palestinians as possible, using bureaucratic processes that are reminiscent of a Franz Kafka novel. The Midrash tells us that one of the things that broke the spirit of the Hebrews in Egypt was that they were given meaningless work. Their work was made harder for no reason at all. It was pure harassment done only out of meanness and vindictiveness. Many of Israel's policies in the West Bank are similarly mean-spirited. They threatened to destroy solar power plants because they were built without permits. Why were they built without permits? Because of the Israeli government policy not to issue building permits to Palestinian projects in Area C. In the South Hebron Hills, the Israeli government has allowed violent settlers to chase Palestinians away from homes that they've lived on for generations, and it took a decade of court battles to get the government to procure the most basic of human rights for these people, to allow them to live humbly in their homes. Palestinians and Palestinian supporters frequently compare Israel to Nazi Germany. Hamas's charter uses the word Nazi 4 times, explicitly calling Israel a Nazi-like enemy. Such charges are absurd, and they're easy to refute. The Jewish population of Europe was 9.5 million before the Holocaust and 3.5 million after. The population of Gaza, by comparison, nearly doubled between 1994 and 2004, from 731,000 to over 1.3 million. If the Jews are treating Palestinians the way Nazis treated Jews, they are not being very effective, are they? The Palestinians' conditions may be difficult, but they're not facing death marches, they're not facing concentration camps, they're not facing wholesale slaughter. The Palestinians are making the wrong comparison when they compare Israel to the Nazis. Anyone with any sense knows that that's hyperbole, totally beyond the pale. But if they were to compare the occupation to living under Pharaoh, that would sting a lot more, because it is a greater ring of truth. Just as Pharaoh was a foreign political power controlling the lives of the Jews, the Israelis are a foreign political power controlling the lives of the Palestinians. Just as Pharaoh's heart was hardened against the plight of the Jews, the Israelis' hearts are hardened against the plight of the Palestinians. The Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist of Tzfat, said, "Only one who can hear the cry of Moses the infant will be able to properly understand the words of Moses the lawgiver." If we lose our compassion, if we lose our ability to hear the cry, the anguish cries of other people, we lose our ability to understand the most basic teachings of the Torah. There was a purpose to the Jewish people's sojourn in the land of Egypt. 36 times the Torah tells us that we have to be kind to the stranger, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. We were there, davka, to learn compassion. If we allow our hearts to be hardened, as Pharaoh's heart was hardened by the early plagues, we too may find ourselves in a situation where only a very powerful disaster, an ultimate plague, will break through the hard shell to force us to do the right thing. Hardening of the heart is potentially physically dangerous as well as spiritually dangerous.